this is what I got out of today's session so far. I might have to revise the slides tonight, but the next part is that we have some experts here. You have heard them already. So to really get closer to some recommendations that the Academy of Technical Sciences can use in its way forward, I would like you to step one step back from your expert role and then, or maybe step in front of your expert role, I don't know, and become a politician. It's definitely a step back, I can hear that. So what would your advice be based on what you have heard today? So if we start from one end, Professor McCullough, would you start? I think you need to press it. Yes.
Okay, okay, great. Well, I mean, I'm not completely familiar with government regulations in Denmark and the way things work out exactly. Clearly, scientific funding in Denmark, I'm sure, is no different than any other place in the world, that scientific funding is very difficult. And I think it's going to continue to be difficult no matter how brilliant we are in describing to our politicians that investment in basic science leads to an innovation economy and growth and jobs. You'll be some sector of politicians who will believe that, and then another sector that won't. And so one thing that one can do in that regard is to work harder, and as you pointed out clearly, to think about translational science, to do high risk, high reward, transformational science, which is wrapped up in basic science in terms of trying to attack problems that are difficult ones. Energy, biotechnology, we heard about today, information technology and computer science. And using industry as a sandbox in some sense, as a way to attack funding. The usual things that stand in the way of that, at least in the United States, are intellectual property control. You know, I don't know what the laws here, but we can't, in the United States, for example, give the we can't take a contract from a corporation and then say, we'll do this research for you, and then you own, as a corporation, all the intellectual property. We say to the company, give us $1 million, we'll do the research, and then we own the intellectual property, and then maybe we'll license it to you for another $1 million or something. And they say, what? Are you insane? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And so the reason is because we're bound by the law but if there are ways to make some deals with corporations, one of the ways that we've gotten around this in the United States is to say, we'll give you, you pay for the research, and we'll give you the intellectual property, and it'll be a non-exclusive, royalty-free. We won't charge you for that intellectual property, but you won't own it exclusively. But then you'll have a period of time at which you can decide whether you want to own it exclusively, and we'll, can make a deal for some fair market value. And we've been able to do that as a way to get corporations to buy in. And then we make a master agreement where every project falls under one contract, and so there's never any negotiation. And I think that that it's difficult for some professors to do it that way because they feel that they're poisoning the ivory tower. But I would submit to you that when they see what these most interesting problems are, there's incredible opportunity to go after that. So public-private partnerships obviously is one possibility. Because the United States is so far behind in intellectual property, major corporations around the world are going to other countries, India and China, and making cooperations with those countries so they can get the intellectual property. So whether Denmark can be a leader in that regard or not, I'm not sure. But if I were a politician, that would be the first thing that I would take that off the table, because that's one way for the country to continue to lead. You have great opportunity. You have amazing scientists. You've always been leaders in science. There's no doubt about it. And with European Union, that's even increased to a broader degree, I think. And so the opportunities are great. So I think those are the things I would be focused on.
I think that's an interesting point, because I think, in fact, Danish politicians went to US to figure out how they should handle this issue of the intellectual property rights. So maybe actually there's a topic here that could be readdressed.
But there certainly are clever ways of sort of getting around this by master agreements in one contract where you don't have to negotiate. You know, when you go with Carlsberg, you don't have to negotiate every single project with them. There's one contract and everybody falls under one. It's all pre-negotiated and it's all agreed upon, and there's no problem.
But to be fair, I think we also see that here as our practice. But again, I think we are actually following US to a large extent, because I think people have the impression that in US you have been so successful in translating research into innovation.
The other thing is at Carnegie Mellon, the vice president for research, and we create more spin-out companies per research dollar in the United States. And we create 10 per year based on licensed technology. And part of that is based in, we have a program called 5% Go in Peace. We take 5% of the company, and then you go in peace. And so as a professor, you can own 95% of the company, but we own 5% as a university. It's a standard deal. Again, there's no negotiation. And this has led to spin-outs. But it's a mistake to think that universities are going, in my opinion, that universities are going to get rich off of licensing. It just doesn't occur. 1 in 20 to 50,000 licenses is a big hit. It's almost never occurs. And so where you can make your money is if you create wealth for your faculty, and then you tell your faculty they will buy you a building when they get very rich, and they will give money back to the university. And this is the contract you have with them.
Let's come back to that topic later. Professor Palsson? What are your thoughts?
Some have already been spoken, but I'll say a few more things. So I guess we come here against is it a little closer? So I guess we come together here against the backdrop of the 75th birthday or anniversary of the Academy, and we are talking about some pretty big challenges. The theme of innovation is the one that has come out consistently throughout the day, including from the minister that spoke to us. So how are we going to deal with innovation? I guess that's what we need to think about, and you spoke about that a little bit in your talk. I liked his slide on the different cultures. So I would say take a pass on the lawyers and the bureaucrats. So don't emulate the East Coast of the Brussels philosophy and go with the doers. In California, they just go and do things, and that's kind of, I think, important. I suppose, so I guess that's in terms of philosophy. So when you go to the United States to look for success, that would be one place to look, and now we know Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon is another place to look. I guess the second thing that comes to mind here to stimulate innovation, you need to accelerate interactions between different disciplines. And I must say, for myself personally, just sitting here today and hearing the two of them talk, I immediately started thinking about new things. So we can now think about ways to take these printable organic polymers, for instance, that can be designed down to cellular levels, and we can start to think about completely different biotechnological devices for photosynthesis or electrosynthesis and some of these processes that cells can carry out. And the same thing with genomic information and this massive amount of sequencing data we're getting out of the biosphere here and there. So that's another theme, I guess, is this continued vigilance of cross-fertilization of ideas and running meetings like this one. The third one I might comment on just a little bit. My time is up?
Nope.
No. The third thing I might just comment on, echoing some of the statements made about intellectual property licensing. I had experience with two universities in the United States starting up companies. One was the University of Michigan, close to Carnegie Mellon, and the UC system, University of California, San Diego. And what you just stated about completely unrealistic attitude to the value of IP, the conditions under which IP is generated, and so forth, I experienced in California. Not so much in Michigan. There we were given much more leeway to develop a company. And I just like to state that what I have so far about the DTU and its attitudes towards IP and spin-out, it's very healthy, and maybe this is the place to come to look for models, because the DTU, as I understand it, takes the sort of approach that you mentioned, just becomes a stakeholder like everybody else through equity participation, and then basically sells or gives the patents to the spin-out either at cost or with some simple milestone payments. And that means that they become stakeholders in parallel with the founders and the investors and everybody that is driving the process forward rather than arguing against them. And I think, quite frankly, that is a model for public universities to think about. They are not in the business of making money. They're in the business of stimulating socioeconomic development. I've always felt that private universities might take another approach because they are private and they own their stuff, but I'm happy to hear that some private universities may take a different approach to it. So those are some of my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Professor Nelson, I noticed in your talk that you gave lectures on how you create a culture. And I thought maybe you could explain to us how you create a culture of innovation.
Well, I'll spend about 15 seconds on each of the different courses, or each of the different lectures I give, and then I'll keep to the time limit. I'm very glad that both of you talked about intellectual property, because I do think that patent and copyright are a major barrier, particularly in the United States. But I won't spend an hour on that topic, although I'd be happy to do so. I've already given you a couple of key words in my lecture. I talked about prototype, prototype, prototype. And that really is what you can do now in my field. You can try 5 things at once and then try it again. I also mentioned analytics and the power of big data. And I talked a lot about transparency, because I think government policies that promote transparency have benefits throughout the innovation ecosystem. Getting more government data available to more people, learning more from each other because you're more transparent. But let me give you a few more words. First, double deep. And by this I mean we need to train students and employees who aren't super specialized. They know one thing really well, and they know something else. So they might be really good in biology, and they know how to use networking technology. They might be really good in materials science, and they might also be really good in social networking. I mean, they combine digital skills with other skills. Our program does this, but there's a huge need for these kind of people who can bridge the gap between the different worlds of the techies and the marketing people and the lawyers and the politicians. We don't have nearly enough of those types of people, and academia is not set up to produce them. Almost every university in the world is still organized by discipline, and yet we need people who cross disciplines. I think if we can do that, then we can have people who can function in different parts of the economy. The US is getting better and better about taking people out of business and putting them in government. They spend some time in academia. So there is this flow of ideas. Too many cultures. France is a great example. You decide on what college you go to, that determines what your career will be. I know that's not quite the case in Denmark. I like the Icelandic model. When you only have 340,000 people, everybody has to do 3 jobs. So when I was there, I met the head of the largest brewing company, who was also the defense minister, who was also head of the Chamber of Commerce. That guarantees cross-fertilization. Another word I want to mention, really important, failure. Enable and celebrate failure. Very few cultures do that. Silicon Valley does. You can't become a CEO unless you've got at least one good failure behind you. And that is also related to my last point, which is quality. And I think that's where we have to keep focused. There's a wonderful new movie called Jury Dreams of Sushi, J-U-R-I. Jury is the name of the world's best sushi chef. He's 80 years old. He has a restaurant in Tokyo with 8 seats. His entire career has been focused on making better sushi tomorrow than he did today. And the whole movie is about how that changes the way you do business. So quality in research, quality in education, quality in government. And I think the best way to get that is through the transparency. But it's easier to be transparent if you allow people to fail. People will tell you what they're doing if you don't punish them when they screw up. And they'll become higher quality people the next day because of that. So those are my simple thoughts, and I'm happy to talk at length now or whenever, online, Skype, any way you wish.
But I think actually we all agree, and we always say to each other that this increased circulation would actually be tremendously useful. And maybe I wouldn't use Iceland as the example.
They were a little too innovative in the banking sector.
But again...
But they weren't transparent.
Yeah. But how can you actually do that? It's easy to say you should do it, but as you all know, there are huge barriers to do that. Some places people are more successful at this than at other places, but I don't think, at least here, we have as high circulation as you would find optimal. What would stimulate circulation?
I can tell you what we do at Carnegie Mellon. You can start at the universities, and what we did is we actually embedded into our tenure and promotion system interdisciplinarity. And so we didn't say if you're not interdisciplinary that you won't get tenure, but we say if you're interdisciplinary, then that's a value add. You're somebody we want at Carnegie Mellon. You're the kind of person, and we just, from the president, the provost, the deans, the department heads, we send that message throughout the whole faculty. So if you're incredibly disciplinary at Carnegie Mellon, you'll be okay. You better be very good. But if you're interdisciplinary, you're one of us. And we started at the top, and we just pushed this down through the ranks of the faculty, and it took a long time to get this into the system. But it's perfectly fine, because we didn't say if you didn't do it, you wouldn't get tenure. We just said that if you do it, it's like diversity. Diversity equals excellence. If you're diverse, then you're excellent. If you're interdisciplinary, then you equal excellent. And professors have one thing in common: they want to be excellent, and they will do whatever it takes to be excellent, whatever that is. If they're the best person in the world of calculating the energy of hydrogen to 95,000 decimal places, then that's what they do, and they're the best in the world at it. But they want to be excellent. And so it's very easy to, you can't fire professors. It's difficult to do anyway. You can only torture them. You can take their space away, or you can, give them a lot of committee work and, cause them trouble. And as an administrator, you get very good at this over time. But what you can do is you can motivate them by your attention and listening to them and treating them with. And so when you see the vice rector, Thomas goes to his faculty that's highly interdisciplinary and starting up companies, and that's the person they're rolling out to speak to the board and to the donors and the ministers and things like that. People notice that, and they adapt, because they want to be considered excellent.
So let me make an observation then. So in academia, we have these three criteria for getting promotion: research, teaching, and service. For many years, people have talked about innovation and socioeconomic development as the fourth criteria, and counting patents and stuff like that as a part of the brag sheet. That has not happened anywhere. And sounds like in your case, you have, like you said, forced from the top down cross-disciplinary values. Would you consider doing that also for this fourth category I mentioned?
Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty. Gets to be pretty controversial if you write it down. So it's well known, but it's not written down. We're not very successful, and I think it is very difficult in academics to have joint appointments. We try to say that, we're real smart. We have a chemistry faculty. He's half chemistry and he's half chemical engineering or whatever. But actually, it just means the person has to sort of have two audiences, and it's very complicated. We do some of that, but I don't think that's a very good way to solve the problem.
I think another issue we have to look at is the concerns about conflict of interest. And that's one of the problems we've had in the US when we've tried to move people from one institution to another, particularly when you move people from business into government. There's always this fear, oh my goodness, this person's going to have conflict of interest and he's going to do things with government policy to reward his former employer. And I think we need creative conflict of interest. We need to allow people to move from one place to another and to bring their interests with them. Just be clear what they are. Be transparent. I've seen too many cases where incredibly good people who needed to be in the policy process were told they couldn't be part of it because they knew too much about the field. They were too conflicted. They were too interlinked with the community that they needed to work with. So I think we have to deal with that problem. I do think we need some really innovative changes in the university system, and it probably will require some changes in the actual structure. I think we start with the funding. If most of the money from the research agencies continues to be given out to different disciplines, then that's the way universities will organize themselves. When I did my PhD, I combined physics, geology, and paleomagnetism. And we went and got funding. We tried to get funding from each of the 3 different places in the research agency. And each time we were told, well, no, you have to go get money for those guys. All 3 of the different groups told us the other group should be funding us. And I've also seen where cross-disciplinary researchers who have joint appointments are the first ones fired because they're not really part of the program. They're up there in the interdisciplinary space.
2 comments on that. One is you can also influence the funding agencies within your country to say that the proposal should be interdisciplinary. And believe me, people chasing money, they'll adapt very quickly. And they've done a lot of that in the United States. They've been very far behind, but they're now starting to move in that direction. The other thing I'd like to say, I always say if you don't have a conflict of interest, you may not be doing anything that's interesting. I mean, that's a provocative statement. But let me clarify. There's nothing wrong with having a conflict of interest. It's acting upon the conflict of interest. And I think this is something we've worked very hard at the university to say. I mean, we're crazy at Carnegie Mellon. Okay, so I am the most conflicted person. I'm in charge of corporate contracts. I'm in charge of spin-out companies. I have 2 spin-out companies. I'm the chief scientific officer of one. I'm a founder. I'm on the board. Some universities won't allow that at all. And they say, you can start a company, but you can't be involved in it. And I think if you're not involved in it, then you're not good. But if you're using that company to bring in grants, and then you pay yourself, you take your grant that you get in your lab, and then you subcontract to your company, and then you pay yourself $100,000 a year in the company, okay, that's acting upon a conflict. But being involved in both things is really should be promoted. People get all caught up in this conflict of interest. There's nothing wrong with it. You just can't act upon it. And you have to watch people because they're inherently going to do something wrong, but it's not that bad.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. I think there are many things that we could continue in this discussion, but I actually promised Lars that I would not lose more time in the program, and I have always done what Lars told me to do. So even though you are waving your hands, you won't get your 30 seconds. Sorry, because a really good joke, then you will get 30 seconds.
I just wanted to congratulate ATV on its 500th anniversary. Because in internet years, you are 500 years old. And that's the speed we'll be moving at going forward.
Good. Thank you.